Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Innovate Finance, our podcast series where we speak to industry leaders on financial innovation and fintech. Our podcasts are available on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcasts. I'm Veronica Glab, Head of Engagement, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Pranav Sood, General Manager of EMEA at Airwallex. Pranav, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Pranav, can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I run Airwallex's business across EMEA. I've been doing that job since April of this year. And prior to that, I spent nearly 5 years at another fintech, a business called GoCardless, where I did a whole range of different things, ranging from international expansion through to the last 2.5 years running our SME business globally. I started my career in consulting. So I spent the first 4 or 5 years working for a firm called Bain. I worked in London, across Asia, and elsewhere. I think the short version of that is I made a lot of slides.
Fair enough. And can you tell us what made you want to join Airwallex?
Yeah, sure. I think it's probably worth just introducing Airwallex as well. I'm sure many of your listeners may not have heard of us before. We're a fintech platform for global businesses. So we've built the infrastructure, the APIs, and the software that enable businesses of all sizes to move money around the world, whether it's collecting payments, whether it's holding and converting funds, or whether it's paying it out around the world as well. We made it super simple and super cost effective for businesses to do. So when I was first approached about the opportunity to work at Airwallex, I really didn't understand the power of what we did or what we could do. And so the reason that I was excited about it was because the first person I met was actually Jack, who's now my boss. And in the course of an hour or so conversation, he told me the full range of things that the product is capable of doing. And he helped me to understand the scale and scope of the problem that we're able to solve. So for me, as I thought about, why should I join this company? Why should I take this step? There were two or three themes that I kept on coming back to. The first was the superpowers of the product itself. The infrastructure, the licenses, the APIs, the developer kit, toolkits, all that kind of stuff that really coming from a fintech background, I know how hard it is to build. The second is this is a super global business. So we're 1,100 people around the world in 19 offices. We have businesses in APAC, across Europe, in the UK, and also in the US as well. And for me, that's incredibly exciting because it gives you that opportunity to learn about doing business and also work with people from all of those different places. And I think that the last thing as well was just the quality and the caliber of the people that I'm able to work with and I got the chance to meet. So if I look at my leadership team in EMEA, and if I look at our leadership team around the world, I see people who've demonstrated success in building businesses all over the world. So whether it's people from Stripe or Revolut or Deliveroo or Uber, these are people who have seen what it takes to scale a company and go from 0 to 1 to 10 to 100. And for me, that's really energizing because it inspires me every day to raise my level and also learn from them and see what I can take away. So product, opportunity and the global nature of our business, and then the people as well is what brought me here.
All right. Well, speaking of energizing, I notice you've got a cup of coffee in your hand. So I think this might be literally our first Coffee with Innovate Finance episode with actual coffee on it. Do you want to tell me what's in your cup and how that connects to the Airwallex founding story?
So I'm aware that your listeners are not going to be able to see this, so they won't be able to appreciate how wonderfully Airwallex branded my cup is. But I'm going to let you down and tell you that it's actually not a coffee. It's a peppermint tea. So I've had my daily dose of caffeine, and if I have any more, I think I probably won't be able to go to sleep. But it's a good question about our founding and our origin, because coffee is really quite deeply ingrained in the origin story of this business. So for anyone who doesn't know, the business was set up by a bunch of friends from Melbourne University in Australia, in Melbourne. And it was set up because they were actually trying to build a coffee company in a coffee shop. And in the process, so the company, the shop's called Tuck and Co. It actually still exists in Melbourne to this day. I've been there myself. They do
Oh,
make really
that's
good
so
coffee. I
cool.
can attest to that. But in the process of setting up that coffee shop, they were exposed to the crazy complexity of doing business globally. So you imagine when you're trying to set up a coffee shop, you've got to buy cups, you've got to buy beans, you've got to figure out how to, pay suppliers, you've got to potentially have customers who are coming from different places as well. And as a consequence of that, you really quickly have to get to grips with all of these different ways of paying and being paid, the complexity of converting funds, the complexity of, dealing with different workflows and different bits of software. And in the process of doing that, our co-founders, so Jack, Max, Lucy, Xi as well, they just thought, God, there must be a better way to do this. And so the coffee company carried on, or the coffee shop carried on, as I said, but they moved to what I think is a much bigger and probably far knottier problem space, which is how do we actually fix the business of managing and moving money globally?
All right. Well, payments is actually quite a crowded market, and there's a lot of players operating and providing similar services to you. So, other than the coffee, what makes Airwallex different?
It's a great question. And I think what makes our product special, our superpowers, it begins with infrastructure. So at the most fundamental level, Airwallex is an infrastructure company. We have built what I think is an incredible layer of licenses and rails around the world, which allow our customers to access local payments, access different forms of payment methods, access different currencies, access different ways and places of creating virtual accounts and wallets, and knitted all of that stuff together into a really coherent and easy to use product. So anyone who knows fintech will know that although we have a global financial system, it's incredibly fragmented, and almost every bit of it doesn't really speak to every other bit. What Airwallex has done at its most fundamental level is build the infrastructure that ties that all together. And so just to make it real for you, Veronica, so people probably will know about Swift. It's been in the news a lot this year. There's been a lot, about how we've excluded Russia and things like that. Swift is a very archaic way of sending money around the world. It's a messaging protocol, but it's basically short form for the correspondent banking networks that exist. You think about Airwallex, the power of what we've built is that we now have a network which allows our customers to bypass Swift. So if you look at the transactions that go through Airwallex, about 93, 94% of them bypass Swift entirely and they go through local rails. That for me is the crux of what makes us special. It's that infrastructure layer at the core. Now, on top of that, of course, you can build the APIs, you can build the software, you can build the whole stack of tools. But if you don't have the infra, if you're not close to the metal, it's really hard to be different. And so what makes us special, what gives us that superpower, it's the infrastructure that we've got, it's the breadth, it's the depth, and it's the quality as well that we're able to offer to our customers.
So I see your adverts on the tube every day on my commute. So what products and services do you offer specifically? And going a little more beyond that, are there any new products that are in the pipeline?
It's a great question. And the way to think about our business is that we can solve two sets of problems for our customers. The first is for themselves and the way that they're managing their own money and their own financial operations. The second is for their customers. So to give you an example, on the first side, you could be an e-commerce store or a kind of fashion brand that's looking to expand globally. I'll give you a good example. Me&M, which is a high-end kind of women's wear brand, which some of your listeners may have heard of. My wife certainly has, which is just to her benefit.
Don't worry, I know them too.
So they expanded into the US, and before they started working with Airwallex, they were struggling with the complexity and the cost of having to deal with multiple currencies and basically settling funds in USD into an account that was forcing them to convert. We're saving them tons of money and tons of time by giving them access to a virtual account in the US that they can settle into directly and therefore save themselves that cost. So on the one end of the spectrum, you've got businesses like that who are using our tools and our products to solve their own financial problems. On the other, you've got a whole bunch of businesses who are using our products to build financial products for their customers. And that's where it gets really interesting, because that's basically embedded finance. And it's saying, hey, look, you want to offer a financial product or a service, but you don't want to go through the pain and the hassle of getting the licenses, building the infrastructure, and worrying about basically becoming, a fintech product. So how do you do that? Well, actually, you can partner with someone like Airwallex and work with us and leverage our infrastructure and our work to do so. So a great example of that would be a business like Qantas, for example, in Australia, who as everyone would know, is an airline. They're not a fintech, but they want to offer a financial product without having to worry about the licensing and the regulation that comes with it.
All right. And going on a little bit to the business side, Airwallex started in Australia, had a very successful expansion westwards, and has now made it to the UK. How's the business doing here in the UK? And are there any plans for further international expansion?
Yeah, it's actually, as you say, it's a really rare thing to be expanding westwards. I don't know that many businesses that have started in APAC and then come to Europe and the US. It's usually the other way around that people tend to see. So that's actually a super interesting experience to be living through right now. We have a great business in the UK already. We've been here for about 18 months. I've got a team here in London of about 70. They are already serving lots of customers. So I gave you, one example. I could also talk about people like Plum. Many of your listeners will know them as a fintech. There are many others that we've been able to serve over the last year or so. As a result, the business has grown really quickly. We found a lot of confidence, and we found a lot of predictability in the places that we can solve problems. And so we're excited about continuing to scale that. Now, of course, we're also looking at the EU. We already have an office in the Netherlands. We also have an office in Lithuania and Vilnius. And as we look into 2023, we will be expanding selectively into the European Union. We're really excited about Benelux. There's a lot. We have a lot of customers, a lot of traction there already. We also think there are interesting opportunities in some of the other continental European markets that we're continuing to explore. The other one that we're very interested in is actually Israel. So we already serve a number of Israeli companies. So people like Papaya Global is one example. Some of your listeners may know them as a payroll software provider. We help them with their payouts and with their need to help their customers move money around the world. And even I was in Tel Aviv actually a couple of weeks ago with Jack. Even in the course of a couple of days, we met literally tens of CEOs and founders who were excited about the ability to actually simplify the movement of money globally. And I think Israel, as anyone who's been there will know really well, is a default global economy. They're always looking for opportunities to expand internationally. So that's definitely something that resonates with us. I was going to say more broadly for Airwallex, of course, we're present in the US. We have a physical presence in San Francisco. We're working with a lot of very exciting customers already. Not too many that I can share the logos of just yet, but in 3 or 4 months, I think we'll be able to give you some quite exciting news. And then, of course, continuing to grow, both looking at the Americas, but also into Asia as well, where we already have a lot of geographical presence and strength.
Wow, you guys are really growing very quickly. And it's not just in terms of the geographic expansion as well, but I do know that you've raised a really successful Series E. So, kind of coming from your vantage point of such a successfully growing and scaling company, what are some of the advice or best practices that you would give to earlier stage startups who are looking to scale at the same level?
I think it's a really interesting question, particularly given the environment that we're in now from a macroeconomic and a funding perspective.
Absolutely.
So if I look back at Airwallex's evolution and growth, one of the things that I think Jack and the founding team did brilliantly was have a really clear view of the blueprint that they were building towards from an infrastructure perspective. And we were and are very lucky to have very supportive investors who gave us the time and the space to build out that infrastructure from the get-go, and not to have to worry about trying to monetize everything on day one, or even in the first couple of years. I don't know that that's a luxury that startups these days are going to be given. I don't know if they're going to be allowed to have 3 or 4 years where they just build out the infra before they start to actually monetize and grow revenue. So I don't know if that lesson necessarily, is one that can be repeated for people listening or for aspiring founders. What I do think people can continue to do is 2 things. One is be incredibly clear about what your superpower actually is. And, as you mentioned, we compete with a lot of people, but actually we don't necessarily believe that we have to win in every single place. We just know the places where our product is differentiated, where we can serve, ambitious, global, growing businesses. And I would urge people who are founding businesses to be very clear about the same thing. What is your superpower? Who is your target customer? The other thing is more of an internal one, which is building a coherent company culture across borders is just so hard. And I don't know that there's a recipe or a formula that, you can just apply. But what I can say is that what we've done, which I think works really well, is begin to define what the Airwallex global culture looks like and feels like, but also recognize that things are quite different in the different parts of the world where we have offices and people. And so striking that balance between an identity, a culture that applies to the company as a whole, and recognizing what makes it special to work for a company in London or in Lithuania or in Australia. It's a really hard thing to do, but I think if you can be mindful of it as you're starting out on the journey, your chances of being successful are way higher.
So out of curiosity, what would distinguish the company culture between London or Lithuania?
I think there are a couple of things. So one is in London, we have probably a much wider range of different functions. So here we have everything, the commercial side of things, finance, many of the supporting functions are here as well. In Lithuania, it's much more of an operational hub for us. And so the people that we have there are focused much more around KYC, onboarding, the operational nitty gritty that makes our business work. And so as a consequence of that, there are some differences in the way that the teams like to interact. If you have more salespeople in a team, they tend to like to come into the office more often, and they tend to be more, extroverted and more, interested in those kinds of things. Whereas the team in Lithuania, they prefer to work in different ways. They're much more flexible. They don't necessarily always come into the office every time. And I think we're okay with that, because what matters is they're delivering amazing output, and they're doing it in a way that works for them and also works for us as an employer.
All right, fair enough. And I'm going to guess that everyone probably drinks as much coffee or peppermint tea as you do.
I wouldn't like to guess, but we do go through a fair amount of it on our weekly grocery order.
Good to know. And I guess one final question from me, looking a little bit more into the future, what is next for Airwallex globally and regionally?
Wow, that's a big question. I think globally, we're going to continue to expand our product suite. So, when I talked a bit earlier about the set of problems that we can solve for customers, I only really talked about the global money movement side of things. I didn't talk about things like expense management, online payments, card issuing, billing, all those kinds of things, which are also really core parts of our value proposition and product. We're going to continue to expand that offering, adding, more software, more services that help global businesses to solve the complexities and problems that come with moving money across borders. Clearly, we're going to continue to look to grow internationally, to expand into new markets and to increase our footprint from a licensing point of view. And I think also, as we expand, we'll continue to look at opportunities to extend our infrastructure into other domains. So whether it's credit, for example, or other themes like that, we'll certainly be interested in and looking selectively to do so. I think regionally, my focus areas are quite clear. The UK business is already in great shape. I think we grew nearly 10x last year, which is fantastic. I've got a fantastic group of people here. And so it's double down on the things that are working. It's find the opportunities to expand into the EU and more widely, places like Israel, as I mentioned. And it's continued to try and build a great team, and try and build an environment where people are excited about coming in and solving businesses' problems.
That's a really positive note to end this conversation on. So thank you, Pranav. And that is all for this episode. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please keep an eye out for upcoming episodes. All of our previous episodes are available on our website, so please take a look at our catalog for many more insights on fintech and financial innovation. And once again, thank you to our guest today, Pranav Sood, the General Manager of EMEA at Airwallex. And thank you all at home for listening. Join us next time for Coffee with Innovate Finance. Bye for now.